The HR director smiled as she handed me the termination letter, her voice soft and practiced as she said, "We're walking you out now, quietly, to avoid any disruption." She had no idea that by walking me out that door on a Monday morning, she had just started a countdown that would end with the CEO losing control of his own board by Friday. My name is Natalie Carson, and for 5 years, I wasn't just the vice president of investor relations at Sterling Technologies. I was the only person who actually told the board the truth. And when they escorted me out without a word, they severed the one connection keeping them safe. Before I tell you what happened over those 5 days, I need you to understand something. Real power in corporate America isn't always loud. It's not always visible. Sometimes it's built in quiet conversations, in relationships forged over years, in trust that can't be manufactured overnight. And when that power is dismissed as disposable, the consequences can be catastrophic. If you've ever wondered what happens when leaders confuse silence for weakness, stay with me. Hit that subscribe button right now, because this story is going to show you exactly how fast an empire can crumble when you remove the wrong person. Let's go back to that Monday morning when everything began to fall apart. I arrived at Sterling Technologies at 7:45 a.m., like I had every morning for the past 5 years. The building in downtown San Francisco was quiet at that hour. Just security and a few early arrivals grabbing coffee before the chaos began. I had a 9 a.m. call scheduled with our largest institutional investor, a routine quarterly check-in that I'd been managing since I joined the company. At 8:15, my desk phone rang. Internal extension. Kimberly Frost from HR. "Natalie, could you come down to conference room 3B when you have a moment?" Something in her tone was off. Too measured, too careful. "Sure, give me 5 minutes." I saved the presentation I'd been reviewing and walked downstairs. Conference room 3B was small, windowless, the kind of room where uncomfortable conversations happened away from curious eyes. Kimberly was waiting with another HR representative I didn't recognize, and our CFO, Martin Hendricks. No CEO. Interesting. "Natalie, thank you for coming." Kimberly gestured to a chair. "Please sit." I sat, my hands folded in my lap, reading the room. Martin wouldn't make eye contact. The other HR rep was holding a manila folder. "We're going to be direct," Kimberly began. "Sterling is undergoing a significant restructuring. As part of this process, we've made the difficult decision to eliminate your position." The words landed like stones dropping into still water. Eliminate. Not transition, not realign. Eliminate. "My position," I repeated carefully. "Vice President of Investor Relations will no longer be a standalone role. We're consolidating those responsibilities under the CFO's office." I looked at Martin. He was staring at his hands. "This is effective immediately," Kimberly continued, sliding the folder across the table. "Here's your severance package. 6-month salary, benefits continuation, standard non-compete, and NDA. We'll need you to sign before you leave today." "Before I leave today?" My voice stayed level, but my mind was racing. "You're walking me out this morning." "We find it's easier this way. Less disruption. We'll have someone from IT escort you to collect your personal items, and then security will walk you to your car." I opened the folder. The paperwork was already prepared, dated from last week. This wasn't a sudden decision. This had been planned. "Does the board know about this?" Martin's jaw tightened. Kimberly's smile never wavered. "All necessary parties have been informed." That wasn't an answer. That was a deflection. I stood up slowly, leaving the unsigned papers on the table. "I'll need some time to review this." "Of course," Kimberly said. "You have until end of business today, but we do need you to leave the building within the hour." An IT technician appeared in the doorway as if on cue. Young kid, probably 25, looking deeply uncomfortable. "Natalie, this is Jason. He'll help you gather your things." I walked back to my office with Jason trailing behind me like an apologetic shadow. Around us, the office was waking up. Analysts arriving, assistants making coffee. No one knew what was happening. By design, I packed my personal items into a box, framed photos of my niece and nephew, a coffee mug my team gave me last Christmas, the glass award from Institutional Investor magazine naming me one of the top IR professionals 3 years running. Jason watched, hands in his pockets, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. "I'm sorry," he mumbled. "This sucks. It's not your fault." When everything was packed, a security guard I'd known for years, Robert, appeared to escort me out. He looked pained. "Ms. Carson, if you're ready." We walked through the office. A few people noticed. Confusion flickered across faces. One of my analysts, David, started to stand, but I shook my head slightly. Not now. The elevator ride down was silent. Robert wouldn't look at me. In the parking garage, he finally spoke. "For what it's worth, this doesn't feel right. It isn't right, I said, but that's not your problem to solve. I loaded the box into my car, and by 9:30 a.m., I was driving away from Sterling Technologies, officially unemployed for the first time in 15 years. What they didn't know, what Martin and Kimberly and whoever orchestrated this hadn't bothered to consider, was that over 5 years, I had built relationships that extended far beyond my job title, and those relationships were about to become very, very important. If you've ever been pushed out quietly, if you've ever been walked out like your years of work meant nothing, drop the word invisible in the comments. Let me know you understand what it feels like to be erased, and if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because what happens next is going to prove that being underestimated is sometimes the greatest advantage you can have. I spent Monday afternoon in my apartment, staring at the unsigned severance papers spread across my dining table. The termination was effective immediately, but I had until 5 p.m. to sign and return the documents. I didn't sign them. Instead, I made a list. 6 names. 6 members of Sterling's board of directors. Not the CEO, not the CFO, not the inside directors whose loyalty belonged to management. The independent directors, the ones who were supposed to provide oversight, ask hard questions, protect shareholder interests. Over 5 years, I had built something rare with each of them. Not transactional relationships. Not the performative quarterly board meetings where executives presented polished slides and everyone nodded politely. Real relationships, built on honesty. When the numbers looked concerning, I told them. When management was spinning a story that didn't match reality, I quietly provided context. When they needed to understand investor sentiment, I gave them unfiltered truth, not the sanitized version Martin preferred. I wasn't political. I wasn't playing games. I was just doing what I believed my job required, keeping the people responsible for governance actually informed. And now I was gone. And they had no idea. At 4 p.m., I sent an email to my personal account, copying all the documentation I'd collected over the years. Board presentations, investor feedback summaries, communication logs. Nothing confidential, nothing proprietary. Just the work product that proved I had done my job and done it well. Then I picked up my phone and called Margaret Chen, lead independent director, a former CEO herself with 30 years of experience and exactly zero tolerance for corporate nonsense. She answered on the second ring. Natalie, hello. I was just thinking about you. I have some questions about the upcoming earnings call. Margaret, I won't be on that call. I was terminated this morning. Silence. Long enough that I checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Excuse me? Her voice was sharp now. You were what? Eliminated. That's the word HR used. My position is being consolidated under Martin's office. When was this decided? I don't know, but the paperwork was dated last week. Another pause. The board wasn't consulted on this. I suspected as much. Natalie, I need to make some calls. Stay available. She hung up. I sat back, feeling the first stirrings of something that felt like hope. Tuesday morning, I went for a run along the Embarcadero, trying to clear my head. My phone rang while I was stretching near the ferry building. Unknown number, I answered. Ms. Carson, this is Harold Whitmore. Board member number 2, former partner at a major law firm. Methodical, detail-oriented, impossible to bullshit. Mr. Whitmore, good morning. I just spoke with Margaret. She told me about your termination. I'd like to understand what happened. I walked him through it. The surprise meeting, the immediate escort, the pre-prepared paperwork. Did anyone cite performance issues? No, they called it restructuring. Interesting, because I've reviewed your work for 5 years and it's been exemplary. Do you mind if I ask you a direct question? Not at all. Do you believe this termination was performance-related? Or was it something else? I chose my words carefully. I believe it was because I provided information that certain executives found inconvenient. Can you elaborate? I could. And I did. I told him about the revenue recognition questions I'd raised, the customer churn data that Martin wanted excluded from investor presentations, the guidance that felt increasingly disconnected from operational reality. I see, Harold said quietly. Thank you for your candor. I'll be in touch. By Wednesday afternoon, my phone hadn't stopped. 4 board members had called me directly. Not through management, not through official channels. Direct calls to my personal cell, asking questions they should have been asking all along. Wednesday evening, I received a text from David, my former analyst. "Natalie, something weird is happening. Martin just got pulled into an emergency call with the board. He looked terrified." I stared at that message for a long time. Then I replied, "Keep me posted." Thursday morning, Margaret called again. "Natalie, I need you to do something for me. Can you document your concerns about the financial reporting? Nothing inflammatory, just factual observations. Of course. Send it to my personal email by noon. The board is convening an emergency session Friday morning." "Margaret, what's happening?" "What's happening is that we're doing our jobs. Finally. We should have been paying closer attention." I spent Thursday morning writing the most careful document of my career. Every concern I'd raised over the past year, every question Martin had dismissed, every data point that didn't align with the story management was telling investors. I sent it at 11:45 a.m. At 2 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is James Reeves. Board member number 5, a venture capitalist with investments across dozens of companies. Thank you for the documentation. It confirms what we suspected. Friday is going to be interesting." I didn't sleep much Thursday night. I kept thinking about Martin's face in that conference room, the way he wouldn't make eye contact. He had known this was coming. He had probably been the one to orchestrate it. And now the board was asking questions he couldn't answer. Okay, we're at the turning point. Everything is about to shift. If you're hooked, if you need to see how this ends, make sure you're subscribed because what happens on Friday is going to be absolutely satisfying. The quiet power is about to become very, very loud. Let's finish this. Friday morning at 8 a.m., an emergency board meeting convened at Sterling's headquarters. I wasn't there, but I didn't need to be. I had eyes and ears everywhere, built over 5 years of treating people with respect, from the assistants to the analysts to the board members themselves. David texted me at 8:45. The board kicked all executives out of the meeting. CEO and CFO are pacing in the hallway like caged animals. At 9:30, Margaret called. "Natalie, are you available to come to the office?" My heart jumped. "When?" "Now. The board would like to speak with you." I drove to Sterling in a daze. Robert was still at the security desk. When he saw me, he smiled. "Welcome back, Ms. Carson. I'm not back, just visiting. We'll see about that." Margaret met me in the lobby, which was unusual. Board members didn't typically come downstairs. "Thank you for coming," she said, shaking my hand. "We're in the executive boardroom." The boardroom was on the top floor, glass walls overlooking the bay. 6 independent directors were seated around the table. The CEO, James Harrington, and Martin were conspicuously absent. "Natalie, please sit." Margaret gestured to a chair. "We'll get right to it. Over the past 3 days, we've conducted an extensive review of recent executive decisions, particularly your termination. We've also reviewed the documentation you provided regarding financial reporting concerns." Harold leaned forward. "We've discovered that your termination was not approved by this board. It was a unilateral decision made by the CEO and CFO without proper authorization." Another director, Susan Park, added, "We've also discovered that several of the concerns you raised were never brought to our attention. Information was filtered, sometimes altered before reaching us." "What we're saying," Margaret continued, "is that we failed in our oversight duties, and you paid the price for trying to help us do our jobs." I sat very still, processing what I was hearing. "This morning, we voted to place both the CEO and CFO on administrative leave pending a full external audit," James Reeves said. "We're bringing in forensic accountants to review the last 18 months of financial reporting." Margaret folded her hands. "Natalie, we'd like to offer you 2 things. First, immediate reinstatement as Vice President of Investor Relations, with a significant salary increase and a seat at every board meeting going forward. Second, we'd like you to consider joining this board as a full member once the immediate crisis is resolved. I couldn't speak. The room was quiet, waiting. You built relationships with us based on trust and transparency, Margaret said softly. That's rare, and it's valuable. We should have protected you and we didn't. We're trying to correct that now. I found my voice. What happens next? Next, we stabilize the company, Harold said. We appoint interim leadership. We complete the audit. We rebuild credibility with investors. And we make sure that no one is ever walked out again for telling the truth. I looked around the table at faces that had always listened to me, even when management didn't. I'll accept the reinstatement, I said. On one condition. Name it, Margaret said. Full transparency. No more filtered information. If the board is going to do its job, it needs access to unfiltered reality. That means direct communication with operational leaders, not just executives. It means hard questions get honest answers. Always. Margaret smiled. Agreed. By Friday afternoon, news had leaked to the media. Sterling Technologies board places CEO, CFO on leave following governance review. The stock dipped initially, then recovered as investors realized the board was actually taking action. I returned to my office on Monday morning. My team was waiting, David leading the applause as I walked in. Someone had put a banner up. Welcome back. Speech! Someone called out. I set my bag down and looked at the faces of people who had always supported me. I'm not going to pretend the past week didn't happen, I said. I was walked out. Quietly. The way they hoped no one would notice. But you noticed. And more importantly, people who mattered noticed. Not because I played politics or made noise, but because I spent 5 years building relationships based on respect and truth. That's the lesson here. Real power isn't about titles or corner offices. It's about trust. And you can't fake that. The applause was genuine this time. Over the next month, the external audit uncovered exactly what I had suspected. Aggressive revenue recognition, understated churn, guidance that didn't match operational data. Nothing criminal, but enough to require restatements and damage credibility. James Harrington, the CEO, resigned. Martin negotiated an exit. The board appointed an interim CEO from outside the company and began a formal search for permanent leadership. And I kept doing my job, the way I always had. Honestly. Transparently. Building relationships that mattered. 3 months later, Margaret approached me after a board meeting. The nominating committee would like to formally extend an invitation for you to join the board. We've amended the bylaws to allow for an employee director position, something we should have had years ago. I'm honored, I said. You earned it. 20 years from now, people will study this case. They'll talk about what happens when governance fails, and what happens when one person refuses to stay quiet. You changed this company, Natalie, for the better. I thought about that Monday morning, the conference room, the escort, the assumption that I would disappear quietly. They were wrong. I wasn't invisible. I was just working on a different level than they understood. And when they finally saw it, it was too late. HR escorted me out on Monday, thinking they'd solved a problem. By Friday, the CEO had lost control of his own board. By the end of the month, I wasn't just back. I was sitting at the table where the real decisions were made. So here's what I want to know. Have you ever been underestimated, pushed aside, treated like you were disposable, only to prove them devastatingly wrong? Tell me your story in the comments. I want to hear it. And if this story showed you that real power is built in relationships, in trust, in doing the right thing even when it costs you, subscribe to this channel. We're telling stories about people who refused to disappear, who understood that being quiet doesn't mean being weak. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching until the end. And remember, they can escort you out, but they can't erase what you built. I'll see you in the next one.